Good morning and welcome to the March 9th, 2016 Board of County Commissioners meeting. I am Kate Flavin, Interim Public Information Officer. Commissioners, before we get started this morning, I would like to take this time to remind you, along with everyone else, to sign up for our regular monthly newsletter sent from you. Signing up is easy. All you have to do is go to our website, www.sedgwickcounty.org. Once you're on our homepage, scroll down towards the bottom and select the link that says subscribe to receive Commissioner newsletters. Once you're here, you'll fill out the necessary information such as your email and your name, and then select which newsletters you would like to receive. That can be one newsletter or all newsletters. And then from there, click the sign up button. Here we are. So the email address, first name, last name, the newsletters you would like to receive, and click sign up. That's all you have to do. And like I said, these will be sent out monthly beginning this month. And if you have no questions about that, I would like to bring up Dan Pugh to talk about Severe Weather Awareness Week.
No questions. I'll make some comments later, but thank you for the reminder on the newsletters. Let's go ahead. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Dan Pugh, and I am your Emergency Manager here in Sedgwick County. We wanted to talk real briefly about Severe Weather Awareness Week, which is next week. It runs March 14th through the 18th. It's a national effort to promote preparedness and outreach efforts among the community relating to severe weather awareness. And for over 20 years, Sedgwick County has partnered with the National Weather Service in promoting this particular week. Our primary outreach that we're doing is in this entire month, but also surrounding this week, is a series of severe weather safety classes. These are free of charge to all Sedgwick County residents. Emergency management partners with each city in Sedgwick County to host classes throughout. We've already held classes so far this month in Viola, Bentley, Eastboro, Valley Center, Colwich, Mulvane, Keachai, and we did a combination class in Mount Hope for Mount Hope and Andale. We do have a presentation tonight in Goddard, so I would encourage everyone to look at that if you're in the Goddard or Garden Plain area. That's at the Goddard City Building at 6:30. We have two opportunities next week during Severe Weather Awareness Week. The first one is Monday, March 14th at the Senior Center in the city of Sedgwick, and the second one is our biggest or most attended one. That's the one in Wichita. That happens Tuesday, March 15th. It is being held at the Wichita Central Community Church, which is on Maple in the west side of town between I-235 and Ridge. And it's hosted by our friends at the National Weather Service. So it's a very special event because the National Weather Service will actually be out there and do the presentation, and they'll answer questions from the audience there. On the front page of our website, you'll see the banner that says Severe Weather Awareness. If you click on that, it'll give you the flyer, and it'll show you all of the remaining classes that we have for the rest of the communities in Sedgwick County. Again, they're free of charge. It's a great opportunity to learn about severe weather safety and severe weather awareness. Another thing that we're doing next week is we'll be participating in the statewide outdoor warning siren test. So this happens Tuesday, March 15th. Unlike previous years, we're going to do it in the evening this year. So it'll happen at 6:30, same time as that training. So if you are not at the training, we'd encourage everybody to exercise your preparedness plans and your plans for a tornado when those sirens were to go off. And that's going to the lowest level of your home or office building. That's going to the most interior room away from windows. If you can put an emergency kit in there ahead of time, then that's great. Certain things that can go in an emergency kit are like extra water, shoes, a flashlight. You can find a lot of other things on our website, sedgwickcounty.org, and go to emergency management, and you can see all kinds of things to help build a kit. We do have a couple reminders about outdoor warning sirens, though. Outdoor warning sirens are designed to warn people outdoors. They're not meant to be heard inside, although sometimes you can hear them. They're not meant to be heard inside. They're meant to be heard outdoors, not in your car. So they're part of a layered approach. We recommend that everybody have a NOAA weather alert radio in your home. We also recommend that you download an app to your smartphone or tablet that helps alert you when severe weather is imminent. And your favorite local media station likely has an app that you can download for that purpose. But wherever you are on Tuesday during the outdoor siren test, we'd encourage you to practice your plan with your family, or if you're at work still, then practice your plan at work, wherever you are. We're also partnering with corporate communications here at Sedgwick County to provide helpful tips through social media throughout the week. So if you're not following Sedgwick County on Facebook or Twitter, for anybody out watching or in the room, then go ahead and do that. Follow Sedgwick County on Facebook and Twitter, and you'll get lots of tips throughout the week to how to be better prepared for storms. So that's all I have this morning. I want to thank you all for your time and your support. If you have any questions, I'll go ahead and answer them right now.
Oh, thank you, Dan, for the great presentation. I have comments or questions from Commissioner Peter John.
Yes, you mentioned Central Community Church event, and you mentioned the date, but I don't think you mentioned the time. Could you walk through the location, which is on the north side of Maple, just west of I-235, and it is east of Ridge Road?
Yes.
But exactly what time on what date?
That will be
that event.
Yes, it'll be 6:30, and it'll be Tuesday, March 15th. And it's a free event, and we'll have lots of prizes to give away as well.
Oh, you didn't mention free prizes.
I didn't beforehand, but I did just now.
Well, let me ask you that. That segues into another question.
Certainly.
Are each of these events going to have door prizes?
Yes, every one of the event will have at least one door prize that we give away. So it's a small preparedness kit. So if you come out, you get a chance to win that as well.
Well, I was going to say, you need to get with Kate because we need to work on the communications. I know what the lead would be on my story if I was writing it up as part of the promotion. I think. But I think it's important for folks out there to know about it. And would you take a minute and kind of describe what's in the kits?
Certainly. So this, your standard emergency kit would have things like a flashlight, bottled water, and different things, shoes, a jacket, something like that. But the other things to think about are things that are specific to you or your family. So if you have pets and you're taking your pets into your shelter with you, then having something that comforts them or some extra food for them would be important. You have children or grandchildren, or if the neighbor kids come over and play at your house a lot, then you'd want to make sure that you have things, coloring books, something to keep them entertained, an Uno deck or a game of some sort like that. If you take medications, then it's a good idea to have rescue medications like an inhaler or nitroglycerin or something in there with you. So everybody's a little different, but you can find lots of information about how to put those kits together. The kit we're giving away is a small one. It has a couple things of water and some snack bars and first aid supplies, Band-Aids, and that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I actually have a question on the water. Excuse me, on the water storage. It seems like if I store water in bottles I buy at the grocery store for very long, it doesn't take very long before that. It's not really very good water at that point, and so I don't think it's intended to be stored for very long. Do you have any recommendations on how people can store a fair amount of water in their emergency shelter location?
Certainly. So, it's a good idea to store water, but like you said, sometimes the water, it doesn't necessarily go bad. It has an expiration date on it, though, because that's when it can start to change flavor a little bit, and maybe it's not as high quality tasting. So we recommend that people rotate out that stock. So if you buy, 1 gallon of water per paycheck, and then put that in your area, and then maybe take, the oldest gallon out, and then use it at your house. So you're not actually wasting anything, but you get the opportunity to rotate that out. The other thing to think about is everyone normally has a hot water heater at their house, and that water is actually drinkable. So because you're showering in it, it goes through your sink. So that's another opportunity to have a lot of water that's already stored that most people don't think of.
There's a joke there somewhere. You have to let it cool down first. Just
right.
saying.
Yes, you do have to let it cool down
don't want to burn
first.
your lips
That's
or
true.
something on hot water. All right. Well, that's great. Well, thank you for that, Dan. I appreciate the update on the opportunities for our community to be safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I guess just back to Kate, I just wanted to say thank you again. These newsletters are a big deal to me, especially. We're working really hard, I think, to find ways to get communication out. And I just wanted to say thank you for helping us make that happen, and I'm excited to getting these started. That's all I wanted to say.
So am I. Thank you. And we have one more presentation. I'll bring the appraiser up to talk about his process.
Thank you.
And then we can start the meeting.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mike Borchard, the County Appraiser. It was at a request Monday at your staff meeting that I provide another report on the 2016 value notices to discuss the role of the appraiser, some state oversight, and the role of the commissioners and the appeal process. Does that sound right?
That sounds exactly right. Thank you.
The appraiser is responsible for managing the property assessment system. It is the appraiser's sworn duty to see that the appraised values in their jurisdiction meet the requirements of the law and administrative rules. In Kansas, we use mass appraisal approach, and the definition of that is the process of valuing a group of properties as of a given date using standard methods, employing common data, and allowing for statistical testing. This background information on this slide is pulled straight from our annual scope of work document. It lays out the client of the mass appraisal, the intended users, and the intended use. So mass appraisal assignments in Kansas for ad valorem taxation fall under the responsibility of county government. The county commissioners are identified as the clients when they engage the county appraiser under a contract. So the intended users of the mass appraisal include the state of Kansas and all property taxing jurisdictions located within the county. And the intended use, the results of the mass appraisal will be used for ad valorem property tax purposes. So ad valorem means add value, and so the commissioners are the client. The intended users are the taxing jurisdictions, and the intended use is the property tax. These are the taxing jurisdictions in Sedgwick County. The county is one of them, but there are many others, including unified school districts, the city, various cities. This was also taken from our scope of work document. This is the mass appraisal problem in Sedgwick County. See there are the real property classifications and the total occurrences of property that are appraised. And in the third column, you see the personal property and the number of properties appraised in that category. So who provides the direction for the appraisers in the state of Kansas? Here's the state level organizational chart, and you can see the voters elect the governor appoints the Secretary of Revenue, the Secretary of Revenue appoints the Division of Property Valuation Director, and the director provides guidance for how we solve the appraisal problem in Kansas. I won't read through this. This is just from the maintenance specifications provided by the director. The county shall follow the provisions of the Kansas statutes, directives issued by the director, Property Valuation Division, and the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. The state also measures the accuracy of appraised values by doing a statistical compliance ratio study. A ratio study is the appraised value divided by the sale price. And over time in Sedgwick County there are thousands of these ratios, so they do statistical analysis on those to make sure that our values are uniform and equal. So why do appraised values change? Most value changes are the result of a changing market. Could be new construction, could be property characteristic updates, or deterioration, or market equalization. State law requires the county appraiser to maintain a median ratio of appraised value to sale price between 90 and 110%. And as pointed out in the prior slide, compliance with this standard is measured every year. So what's going on in the market? You can see from the charts the market activity is picked up. When appraisers have more market data to analyze and identify trends, and we can support our values and value trends more accurately, and our valuation models perform better. There's an increase of 30% in market activity since 2011. I borrowed this slide from the Center for Real Estate at WSU. You can see some similar market trends as far as home price appreciation over the last several years. The value equalization process. So what I'm displaying here is a sample of residential neighborhoods in Sedgwick County. They're bounded by the green boundary lines, and you'll see a number inside there. At the micro level, that's where we start the analysis. We do ratio studies within those neighborhoods every year. Generally, we have ample data over time to analyze, and when we don't have ample data, we have to expand to areas where there is a similar market activity. This slide tries to demonstrate the housing development in Sedgwick County. It's a box plot with the year built on the x-axis and appraised value on the y-axis. You see the blue bars. There's a black dot in the middle of each of those blue bars at the year built, and that is the median appraised value for that year built. The blue bar is actually the interquartile range, or 50% of the data. You can see over time that as properties get newer, values are higher. You can see the vertical lines at, for example, at 1930, that represents 10% of the housing stock. And then the distance between that line and the next red line is 10%. So each one of those is a 10% cut. Commercial, we have commercial neighborhoods as well, where we analyze properties within those neighborhoods, but commercial is a little bit different. In residential, a house is a house. Commercial, there's various property types, and we have to stratify and analyze each of these property types and compare our values with market activity. Here's a similar chart on commercial property development. The two horizontal red lines, the 270,100 is the median value in Sedgwick County, and 774,620 is the average value of a commercial property in Sedgwick County. We also test vertical inequities in the equalization process, where we're plotting our ratios on a scatter diagram, and we fit a trend line to it. And if the trend line is perfectly horizontal, then there's no assessment bias in our values. We don't want to allow any regressivity into our appraisals, so we test, make sure that the higher valued properties are valued as fairly as the lower valued property.
Let me ask a question on this particular slide. Is this a single year?
Yes,
It is a single year. You know what year that is?
I don't.
It may not be important. I was just curious. There's a line through the middle of that data there. So if based on your home price, you can see the average value for a home of that price, I guess, is above, I guess 100%, 1.00 would be perfectly assessed. Is that correct on the left axis?
That would be the sale price and the value will reach.
It would match?
Yeah.
Okay, so anything below that means that the appraised value is less than the market value?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Commissioner Peter John?
I was going to ask the same question about what year it was. I was interested, Mike, if not only the year, but if this trend, in terms of the deviation off that black line, it's very hard to see. I don't know how successful it would be to see this. You're watching this on TV at home, but there is a roughly slightly less than horizontal. It gets a little bit lower on the right-hand side of the chart, but was interested in terms of the deviation off the mean, assuming that the mean is that dark line through the center, Mike. And am I making a safe assumption that calling it a mean line, or
No,
should I call it a median line, or it's none of the above?
It's a regression line.
It's a regression line, okay. Because I'd be very much interested in knowing how the dispersion off that regression line looks, and without getting really deep into the statistical weeds in terms of, but trying to make it understandable, because for folks who are following this and concerned about the valuation on their property in general and residential property in particular, that would be, do you have any ballpark idea on how recent this line is? Is this something you have to do every year for the state?
We do this every year just for our own purposes, and this is going to be prior to our final review. So hopefully at the end of the final review, we test it again, and that line is flat.
Okay, thank you.
I guess one other comment on this slide would say that there are some properties that are up to 20% appraised value above market value, and some that are down to, looks like around 68% or so of appraised value of market value. So in other words, there's a range, and anybody above 100%, theoretically might be interested in making an appeal at some point. And this would be, again, one of those things where, as long as they're within that range of plus or minus 10%, I'm sure it means you're doing your job exactly right. Anything above 110%, I guess, would be, they make a fairly reasonable argument at that point that my appraised value is higher than it should be, and this is kind of the type of data they might be interested in seeing this.
Well, again, this is prior to our final review. This is the equalization process, so most likely we've modified those values.
Very good.
All right.
I'll be quiet. Go ahead. Thank you.
We also look at horizontal inequities in the equalization process. So we'll do, like mentioned before, we'll do ratio studies within each neighborhood. Here's an example of just four neighborhoods. You can see neighborhood 1, the median ratio was about 85%. Neighborhood 2, the median ratio is about 102%. Neighborhood 3, 90%. And neighborhood 4 was right at 95%. So in the equalization process, we're going to push those ratios and values back down to our target lines. So that's why some properties go up and some properties go down. Just briefly mention that agricultural land makes up 67% of the area in the county and represents about 1% of the total assessed value. And the Department of Revenue Property Valuation Division sets the ag use values for the entire state. So here's the information on ag use value. I won't read through it. We've gone over it before, but it's there in writing if you'd like to see it. And this again is the summary of our 2016 valuation. This information was published in the newspaper. It's available on your facts and details pages. So value notices were mailed out the 1st of March to properties that did see a change in value or classification. If property owners did not receive a value notice, they were available by requesting through our office, or they can research their property information online. They can pull off their valuation notice, their property record card, and review some market data inside their neighborhood. Quickly, the 3 levels of the appeals process annually. The informal hearings, there's 2 forms. The spring equalization process is what starts March 23rd. And it is probably the preferred and best time to appeal your property value. If you don't appeal it at the informal level in the spring, then the next opportunity would be to pay your property taxes under protest. If you're not satisfied with the results at that meeting, the Small Claims Division of the Board of Tax Appeals is the next level. Property owners must meet with a hearing officer hired by the state, and all residential appeals will be processed through this process, and commercial appeals less than $3 million may use small claims as well. If you're not satisfied with the results there, then the formal BOTA hearing. The formal BOTA hearings are generally held in Topeka. So if property owners do not think their values reflect fair market value, they can fill out the back of the valuation notice, return it to Sedgwick County Appraiser's office within 30 days of the date indicated on the front of the notice, and informal hearings begin March 23rd. This is a mass appraisal process, and it's not a perfect process. Appraisers have to make a lot of assumptions in the process, especially on residential property and interior property characteristics. So if owners would like to meet with an appraiser, review their property characteristics, return your value notice, and we'll schedule the meeting. So it's important to remember that the county's appraiser is required by law to value property in a uniform and equal manner and should not be considered an adversary. An increase in value does not necessarily result in an increase in taxes. The revenue needed for local services is set during budget hearings held in August. Increases or decreases in property values do not change the amount of tax dollars needed for local services. So I just want to review these key dates one more time. Our appraisal date for the mass appraisal is January 1. We mailed value notices March 1. Personal property renditions are due back to our office next week, and we'll start the valuation process on those. May 1st, personal property value notices will be mailed, and May 15th, personal property informal hearings begin. And on June 15th, we certify our appraised values to the county clerk, and that essentially completes the mass appraisal. So that's my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Yes, Commissioner Peter John?
Thank you. I appreciate the update and the information. I appreciate the update and the information. I've had communication from folks who had questions and concerns, and when those notices go out each year, that always has some impact on what I hear from constituents. Could you jump back to slide 14, please? Could you help me out? I noticed those red boxes, and I wasn't 100% sure what that indicated. And when you talked about residential neighborhoods, I guess I've got two questions for you. I guess I'll just leave with the first one. Walk me through the red boxes. What does that indicate?
Those are specific property types. Anything that's red and with a 9-9 neighborhood is a different property type. It's a condominium community.
So it's not a non-single family residence?
Well, it could be a single family residence, but it's a condominium. It's just a different setup.
Okay. When you break the county into various neighborhoods, roughly how many homes would you have in the average number in an average neighborhood that you have here? I'll just pick out one of the numbers up there. I think 3736 is, or maybe 3640 or 3670. Is there a kind of ballpark number or a range or any more size you can provide me?
On average, around 200.
About 200.
Yeah.
Okay. One of your first slides you had, and I think it's between the third and fifth, you had breakdown in terms of how much goes to the various taxing units. Yeah, there we go. Let's stay there for a minute. when it says USD general and USD other, can you help me out? I think that means unified school districts, so that's the school portion. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes.
And we've got two categories for school districts. Why?
I'll try to answer it. I'm not promising it's 100% accurate, but there's the general fund, and then the other is generally the bond fund.
So, for instance, I know the city and county both have bond funds, but they're rolled in, and the county, we're a little bit less than 24% of the total mill levy, according to that chart, right?
Correct.
And that's a little bit less than the city average across Sedgwick County. That's for all cities, all 20 cities that are all earn part in Sedgwick County combined, right?
Correct.
Okay. So if I'm looking at that, and the school district's just a shade over 45% of the total, if I had those two USDs together. So
Yes.
So if people want to understand their property tax bill and they're looking at that chart, the biggest single item, or if you combine the two school districts, for whatever reason they've broken those out, and they're together. If we broke out our bond portion, it'd be a much smaller percentage of, I think, our general fund. But okay, I think that's an important chart for people to understand and look at.
But it is not. I mean, it'd be better to look at your own tax bill to get that information because it varies across.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
So everybody, if they look at their tax bill on the back, has a breakdown and how it's changed year over year. Let me jump over to slide 18. I noticed, is it fair to say that there's a wider divergence? You've got that red line down the center, and it looks like there's a lot of numbers. Is that any sort of a divergence off of an average line or mean line or anything, or is that something else, Mike?
The line at right under 800,000.
Yeah, 800,000.
That is the average commercial property value.
Okay, so we've got some that are worth a lot more, some that are worth a lot less. Okay. Appreciate that clarification. Next slide, 19, please. That's back to that dispersion off the mean that we talked about a little bit there. The one question I meant to ask on this and didn't when we talked about it earlier, does that plot basically show every parcel of property in Sedgwick County, or is that some sort of a sample?
This is a sample. This is just properties that have sold.
So it's just simply the properties that sold during that, whichever year that was?
Compared to its appraised value.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Unruh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Mike, I just want to express appreciation for your presentation this morning. I think it's helpful, clarifies a lot of issues for not only us, but for our constituency out there. This time of the year, there's so many questions that arise, and to have a factual presentation like this, I think, is very helpful. One of the facts I think that you presented and we're aware of, but a lot of our citizens are not, and that is that the county commission is your client rather than your supervisor or your boss, even though we work together very collegially and I think very well, but your reporting line of authority goes back to the state rather than to the county commission. So maybe I'm just saying that a little bit in defense, I suppose, because we do get contact from our constituents. But I think another important item here is that you have a system that's used all across the state. It's a proven mass appraisal system. And I think in your first slide, it indicated that you had the sworn duty to make sure that these appraisals were as close to market value and followed that system as possible. To me, that was an important statement, that this is not arbitrary or frivolous, but you have a very heavy moral responsibility to do what's right for our citizens according to this system that is in place in our state. So those are the points I wanted to make. And once again, I want to thank you for your presentation.
You're welcome. Commissioner
Peterjohn?
Thank you. I appreciate Commissioner Unruh's comments, and I think to clarify it for the record, Mr. County Appraiser, is your office operating under the authority granted to you and the requirements established by state law? Or are you operating under the authority and responsibility established by resolutions from this county commission?
By state law.
So it's state law that you have to respond to.
Yes.
That's an important point that I think sometimes gets overlooked. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Peter John. Actually, that was really one of the reasons I think I wanted you to present this today. You know, you made a really great presentation just maybe a few weeks ago, and it was a lot of information in there, but it really wasn't geared towards the appeals process. And I guess that's one of the questions we're getting a lot right now as commissioners. Where a lot of people they're upset because they see their value went up and they believe their taxes are going to go up, and so they're calling commissioners. They're saying, you know, why are you guys doing this? And so I guess my hope is that we would get the information out. It really is not commission driven. This is state law driven, and you're doing the responsibilities that were handed to you by the state of Kansas, and you're doing this in the most fair manner as possible. And so, of course, property taxes are a little bit subjective, and I guess that's why there's appeals process in place. So anybody who feels that their property was unnecessarily the value changed, and they believe that they want to make an appeal to that, can certainly do so. And do you have any anecdotal data on how many people appeal their property taxes each year, and how many of those are successful in making some change to their value? I
don't have the success rate, but generally it's been less than 3% the last several years.
And that's how many people appeal, or that's how many people have their value changed?
That's how many people appeal.
Appeal, very good. Anyway, so I guess my message to the community is, if they have concerns about their value, certainly to pay attention to the deadline. There is a 30-day deadline on their tax notice, valuation notice.
Thank you.
They need to pay attention to that and fill that out quickly. And those were mailed out on March the 1st, so the time is clicking. And yes. The best way to make that appeal is to do that here during the month of March.
Correct. Okay.
Well, that's really all I needed from you. I thank you for the presentation, and I hope that maybe every year we can maybe have this reminder. I think this is a good thing to do. In addition to the other presentation that you made, I think this is very timely to have this presentation in the middle of March at about this time of the month. So thank you again for your presentation.
You're welcome.
All right, Kate, you're wanting to come back here and say some more.
Just that with all of this information, you can now start your meeting.
I am, and I'm so sorry. I feel sorry for a pastor for waiting patiently. We do need to start the meeting officially. Madam Clerk, first item of business, please.
Invocation to be led by Reverend Rick Thornton, United Methodist Church. Please remain standing for the flag salute.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we are grateful this morning for these commissioners, persons you have created unique and unrepeatable. May they know, dear God, that as citizens of this county, we pray for them and their families. And we are also grateful for the employees of this county. And may they know that as people of this area, we pray for their safety and give thanks for their dedicated work. Help us, Lord, all of us, to do what you would have us to do to build a greater good for all citizens in this county. And Lord, we seek your will for these commissioners as they use their minds to think through decisions, their hearts to offer hope and love, and their emotions to feel others' pain as well as their own. In the spirit of unity. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I should have said this is the regular Board of County Commissioners meeting for the month of March the 9th, 2016. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Roll call. Commissioner Unruh.
Present.
Commissioner Norton.
Present.
Commissioner Peter John.
Present.
Commissioner Ranzau.
Present.
Chairman Howell.
Present. All right. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Consideration of minutes.
Commissioners, what's the will of the commissioners?
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the regular meeting minutes of January 6th, January 13th, and January 20th, 2016.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. See no discussion. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh,
Aye.
Commissioner Norton,
Aye.
Commissioner Peter John,
Aye.
Commissioner Ransall,
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. All right. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Appointments. Resolution appointing members to the Sedgwick County Solid Waste Management Committee.
Mr. Chairman, Eric Yost, County Councilor. Items D through G are all appointments by this commission to the Sedgwick County Solid Waste Management Committee. Do you want me to take them up individually or as a group?
Without objection, I would like to do this as a group. Seeing no objection?
I believe we do have at least one person who is present to be sworn in, but I will tell you that the individuals who are being appointed in item D, it is Zach McHatton. In item F, the person being appointed is Eric Bergen. In item I, no, I'm sorry. Item H, I'm sorry, that was item D, was Mr. McHatton, or item E, and then item F is William Ellison, who I believe is going to be present here today, and item G is Eric Bergen. Is Mr. Ellison present? All right. Are any of the other individuals present? Well, Mr. Chairman, the paperwork appears to be in order. I would urge adoption of all four of those resolutions.
Okay. I would entertain a motion for adopting the resolutions for items D through G. Commissioner Peter John?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to make the motion that we adopt the various resolutions for those four individuals that you named.
Second.
A motion and a second. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh,
Aye.
Commissioner Norton,
Aye.
Commissioner Peter John,
Aye.
Commissioner Ransall,
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. And for those members that are here and ready to be sworn in, if you'll please approach the microphone.
Morning, Mr. Ellison. I'll state the oath to you if you'll raise your right hand and say I do or I swear at the end, okay? I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Kansas, faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Sedgwick County Solid Waste Management Committee, position number 5, so help me God.
I do.
Thank you. Do you want to say anything?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ellison, for being here today and for taking the sign up for responsibility for one of these board positions. I really appreciate your willingness to do so. All right, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
New business.
Mr. Chairman, Eric Yost, County Councilor. Item H is a resolution by which this commission would reduce the number of members on the Mental Health Advisory Board. We've had 2 positions unfilled for some time, and this would still allow a member of the commission to appoint 3 people. It would be a board of 15 people that would remain after this resolution is adopted.
Any discussion from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the resolution.
Second. Okay. See no other discussion. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh,
Aye.
Commissioner Norton,
Aye.
Commissioner Peter John,
Aye.
Commissioner Ransall,
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. Thank you. Okay. Next. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Consent agenda.
Wait.
No.
Item
J.
I.
Sorry.
We need J and K. J first.
I apologize. New business.
Item J.
Item Igloo. Item I, please, is the next item.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's item H.
We just finished item H.
Item India. Okay.
Very good.
Consideration of a grant from the Kansas Department of Health and Environment for services provided at the Sedgwick County Health Department.
Good morning, Commissioners and Board of Health. Adrienne Burnletz, Health Director. Before you this morning is our annual Aid to Local grant from Kansas Department of Health and Environment. It is the main way that state health departments funnel federal and state money to local health departments so that we can do the work that we do. And we have received this funding for well over 35 years, and it supports our mission to prevent disease, promote wellness, and protect our community from health threats. This year, we are requesting $1,965,732. There is a match requirement of both in-kind and hard, which we can meet without asking for any additional local funds. This application funds portions of several program areas as well as portions of 31 positions. This funding helps support public health infrastructure, family planning, our maternal child health services, mobile immunization services, sexually transmitted disease control, and our public health preparedness. Without this funding, many of our programs would be drastically reduced or would not be able to provide services at all. We are requesting an overall increase of $73,008, or 3.86% above the 2016 state fiscal year award. This contribution from Kansas Department of Health and Environment is the foundational piece of many of our public health programs. It allows us to continue the work towards improving the health status of our residents by assuring that our children are immunized, our most vulnerable women receive well women checkups, and education about how to stay healthy in between and during pregnancies. These programs help to strengthen the health of our community, and I recommend that you authorize the chair to approve the application and to sign any and all related documents, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for being here and for the presentation. And Commissioners, any comments or questions? I have one real quickly. You mentioned there's a 3.86% increase in the request this year.
Yes.
Can you talk about what's going on in the community that's causing us to want to ask for a 3.86% increase?
Well, actually, it's an increase from what we were awarded, but not from what we actually requested in the 2015-16 year. The KDHE has given us more money for our STD program because of an increase in syphilis cases. It requires a lot more person power to be out investigating contacts. So that is the only program area, if you look back to the 15-16 year, where actually there is any increase of funds.
Regarding the accounting of this, so let me make sure I get this right. So we requested a certain amount, we received a little bit less. Do we account for that money specifically, separate from other things we do within the health department, so we can know how much money that we actually spent in these categories?
Yes.
Is this in the background information here somewhere? Do we know how much money was actually spent last year?
Well, I do have the finance manager with me now. We would have to spend the money that we are awarded from them, because they go to a lot of staff positions, 31 positions. So the money that we are awarded from KDHE, we do spend that money.
So it's basically 100% spent?
Yes.
Okay. There's nothing left over. Do we need additional funds to fund these services, or is this like it just perfectly matches our expenditures and our revenue are exactly the same?
Well, with the increase for the STD control program, that is going to help us be able to get out there and do those investigations more. So we're thankful that they decided to give us more money in that area.
I noticed that the amount is a kind of a strange amount. $1,965,732. Is that a formula or some type of a worksheet to get you to that number?
No, but there are some of the funding. KDHE provides us with a set amount, and we don't get to request whether they raise that or decrease that. The other programs, we are requesting money based on the positions that we need to fund through those programs and any commodities and contractuals. And then when we're able to, we do request an increase to cover benefits that might be increasing for that fiscal year.
All right. Other questions from commissioners? I entertain a motion from Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we take the recommended action.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Let me just say, I probably should ask the community here, is anybody from the public would like to speak to this item? I should have done that on the previous item. I didn't do that. I intended to. But all right, seeing no one from the public that wants to speak to the item, I think we're ready for a vote. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh?
Aye.
Commissioner Norton?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn?
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau?
Aye.
Chairman Howell?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Memorandum of Understanding regarding the Wichita and Sedgwick County Exploited and Missing Child Unit.
Good morning, Commissioners. Colonel Richard Powell with the Sheriff's Office. You have before you actually two separate agenda items pertaining to the Exploited Missing Children's Unit this morning. The first item up for discussion is the renewal of the annual Memorandum of Understanding between the three entities that comprise the Exploited Missing Children's Unit, that being the Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office, the Wichita Police Department, and the Department of Children and Families, formerly known as SRS. This is a simple renewal that we do on an annual basis. There are no substantial changes to the MOU that we've had in the previous year. Funding has remained the same. We will see a couple minor changes with regards to the naming change from SRS to DCF. And that will be covered in the second document that we'll be talking on the next agenda item. The MOU explains in detail that you have in your package for your review the various staffing makeup of the organization, the functions and mission of the organizations, the duties performed, and the accountability of the organization. As you all know, this is the same as in previous years. All of the budgetary oversight is handled by the Sheriff's Office on the annual basis, but the individual agencies, and that's for the operational and overhead costs, the physical personnel cost tied to individual employees are handled by the individual agencies themselves, respectively, with their own budgets. Before I end on this particular agenda item, I did bring with me this morning Lieutenant Travis Rakestraw from the Wichita Police Department. Lieutenant Rakestraw is the commander of the Exploited Missing Children's Unit, and I don't believe last year we gave a cursory overview of the status of EMCU. I know we did one for ICAC. We do that on a regular and ongoing basis because of I know the concerns you have. And the significance of the information and the progress of the organization. We thought this year we would bring you some highlights of the larger umbrella organization, which is EMCU. And again, Lieutenant Rakestraw is prepared to offer some review of the organization, some year-end statistics from their progress in the calendar year 2015. So if there's no objections, I'll have Lieutenant Rakestraw make a few comments.
Welcome to our board meeting, Lieutenant Rakestraw. Look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you. Good morning. The Exploited Missing Child Unit was established back in 1985 with 6 detectives and 6 social workers to investigate sexual abuse cases within Sedgwick County. Since that time, we have grown substantially. The working relationship that we have between the Wichita Police Department, Sedgwick County Sheriff's Office, and the Department of Children and Families has been sensational. Today, the Exploited Missing Child Unit investigates everything from sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, endangerment, runaways, child abductions, and human trafficking of child victims. So the amount of cases that we investigate today is quite a bit different than what it was back in 1985. We also have a great working relationship with the Child Advocacy Center of Sedgwick County. The Child Advocacy Center provides free advocacy services as well as counseling to victims of these crimes to help them deal with the trauma that's been inflicted upon them. In 2015, we established a human trafficking investigative unit within our section. We already investigated human trafficking crimes with juvenile victims, but we assigned 2 detectives specifically to work those cases because of the technical expertise that goes into those investigations and the amount of time that it takes to do those investigations. It greatly improved the quality of the work that we were providing. Some of the statistics that we had for the year ending 2015, we worked 620 sexual abuse investigations down in our unit. We worked 750 physical abuse cases down in our unit to go along with our runaway cases, our human trafficking cases, and then we also get additional reports through the Department of Children and Families that were not reported to the police that we also investigate. So we stay very, very busy in our unit, and we've always appreciated the support we've gotten from the County Commission.
Thank you for the information, Lieutenant Rakestraw. Commissioners, do you have? Go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry. I was just going to state if there are any other questions or comments you may have, the Lieutenant and myself would certainly stand and try to address any you may have.
We have some questions or comments from Commissioner Peter John.
Thank you. Would you talk just a minute in terms of how the challenges your unit's facing, because you mentioned that the unit has grown since the 1980s and the technology certainly has changed, and that's raised problems going forward. But I think the folks I hear from say, gee, how do we stand in this very challenging and difficult area, and what can the average citizen out there say or do, in terms of helping you all operate and understanding what we need to do to try and keep the kids in our community safe in particular, the children in particular, but everyone safe in our community?
Well, I think to get involved, number one, I think we all recognize that we are a better informed society than we were 20 or 30 years ago, especially in regards to child abuse crimes. We as law enforcement have done a great deal as far as training and education to be better equipped to deal with these types of cases. But we still need the community as a whole to be understanding that these crimes do exist, and we can't turn a blind eye to it. We always request and quite frankly expect that when we see a crime, we want the community to get involved and to report it. And there's numerous ways to do that through the hotlines through the Department of Children and Families, as well as calling 911 to report a crime. But we also need more services, people getting involved with kids that are in need. There's a lot of kids that are out there that are in foster care that don't have that good, strong family unit at home. So we need people that are good mentors in our community, people that can be good role models to get involved and to step up and provide opportunities for our kids to that quite frankly may not have a lot of opportunities available to them.
Well, let me be a little bit more specific then in terms of runaway situations or running away. Is that a growing problem or pretty stable, or how? Are there any? Where do we stand?
Last year, actually, we had an increase in runaways. We had approximately. It was over 1,800 runaways within Sedgwick County, and that's very taxing on our services. We do our best to try to go out and follow up on any leads that we have. We also try to identify kids that we would consider to be high-risk runaways, kids that are at danger for various reasons specific to their case, falling victims to human trafficking. And so we try to do everything we can to recover them and then to do an assessment on them through our office on the high-risk runaways, as well as the Children's Home does an assessment, and JIAC does an assessment on them to find out what they have been exposed to on the street, what they, have they fallen prey to human trafficking type situations, have they fallen into drugs, things like that. And then we try to get the appropriate social services involved on some of those issues to help, and on the criminal issues, then of course we get notified and try to do what we can to solve those crimes.
You mentioned the words human trafficking. How many talk about human trafficking and how it overlaps with runaways, and how that impacts what you all are doing and how you all operate.
Absolutely. As law enforcement, we're always looking for trends in crimes to help us become more efficient in what we do and to better target our resources. One consistent theme that we have seen through human trafficking victims or the sexual exploitation of children is that many of these kids have been victims of sexual assault at some point in their life, and the second thing is they're runaways. A lot of them are running away from foster care, but many of them are just running away from home for various reasons. And when they run away from home to get away from whatever is going on at home, many times then they're out on their own on the street, and they as kids they're not as emotionally stable or mentally stable to make the appropriate judgments in their life, and so they are easy targets sometimes for people that wish to do them harm. And so runaways are of particular importance to us in regards to human trafficking cases, because those kids are vulnerable, and we know from experience that there are people out there that want to take advantage of them.
Thank you.
Commissioner Norton?
Well, Lieutenant Rakestraw, please tell all your staff and your colleagues how much we appreciate what you do. I've been very involved with the Child Advocacy Center and all that you do for many years. And I think the public needs to know that there's going to be a game changer in our community come this spring, maybe early summer, when we move into the brand new Child Advocacy Center, where all of the multidisciplinary groups that deal with child abuse, neglect, trafficking, internet crimes, sexual assaults for the most vulnerable in our community will all co-locate in a facility built just to take care of that issue in our community. And I think our community should be real proud of that. Sedgwick County was part of the early adopters of that program. And I hope that makes your job a little easier, because you're co-located with medical professionals, with interrogation facilities that are going to be built just for that, and to be co-located with the DA and Division of Children and Families and all the entities that work on this. So I hope that helps improve your ability to be efficient and effective and take care of more cases, because you're almost overrun as it is now. And to be more effective and to be co-located with everybody you need to deal with. I mean, I've gone into the basement of the state office building and seen the facilities you've had to work in, and we're really trying to upgrade what the facility looks like that you get to work in. So I'm pretty excited about that, but I thank you for the work you've already done, because it's pretty amazing.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Norton, do you know the approximate date that building is going to be able to be occupied?
It's under construction right now, and it's moving pretty fast. I think we had hoped late spring. I really believe it'll probably be summer, early summer, maybe June. But it's coming up pretty fast, and we'll get everybody moved in there. Once again, I really believe it's going to be a game changer. You know, kids that were sexually abused could have to go to 5 different places in many times to get medical treatment, to get interrogated, to visit with the DA, to go through all the processes. And now they can go to one place where everybody can meet and co-locate and discuss the case very easily, where the child is not re-traumatized over and over. Mm-hmm. And that's going to help the system in itself. So I'm pretty excited that we've really taken a step in our community to say children are important. Our most vulnerable children are even more important, and we're going to take this darn serious, because it is a serious issue. Human trafficking is not getting any better just because we have I-35 running right through the middle of our community, and that's a conduit to move these young vulnerable women and young men up and down the interstate system from Texas to Minnesota. And we need to be aware of that. We need to understand it. The other thing that will be there is the ICAC unit, Internet Crimes Against Children. And that's a statewide entity there. We run that for the state, because internet crimes have no county lines, have no state boundaries. I mean, when you know that we've had to investigate people from California, Minnesota, Florida, that are preying on our kids here locally, you understand the magnitude of that problem really fast. And I wouldn't do that job. I've over the years observed what our law enforcement people do in that ICAC unit, and I couldn't do that job. I could not sit and look at pornographic images all day and try to understand who's on the other end of that computer that is stalking our youngest and most vulnerable kids. So, I mean, I could go on this because I spend a lot of time on it, but my hat's off to the work that you do, and I'm pretty excited that we're going to make it easier for you here real soon.
Thank you.
I'll just say I did tour the facility that's being remodeled for these new offices, and it's going to be an extraordinary organization and a resource for this community. My only comment walking away was I'm kind of sad that this is even needed. You know, you said in 1985 we had 6, and now I guess I'm not sure if you want to tell me how many we have now, but I'm sure it's a lot. And
yeah, if I remember correctly, we've got 18 investigators. I believe 2 of those are paid through some federal funds for the ICAC grant. But yeah, I believe we have 18 investigators total, counting 2 officers and 16 detectives.
You know, I think if I remember correctly, I think they were hoping this would open. I think I heard the word May, but based on the complexity of the construction project, I'm going to guess it'll be a little bit later than that, but we'll see. I am excited for ribbon cutting to get that building, done, and so I'm very excited about that. It's a good thing for this community, and by the way, Sedgwick County did invest in this. Sedgwick County government, I think, donated $1 million to the cause to get this building moving forward, and so I want to make sure we highlight the fact that we were partners with other donors to make this happen. Well, anyway, I don't have any other questions for you. My only comment, I guess, I'm just sorry that the community has such a need for this type of organization. I wish it was going the other way.
Yes.
And that's unfortunate, but I'm glad we do have something in place to deal with the problem that's going on in our community. We do have a item before us, Commissioners. Would anybody want to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to make a motion to take the recommended action.
Second.
Okay, this is just for item J. Okay. We have a motion and a second. And since I want to just do this as a matter of custom, does anybody from the community want to speak on this item before we take action? Seeing none. Seeing no other comments or questions from Commissioners, Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh?
Aye.
Commissioner Norton?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn?
Aye.
Commissioner Renzaw?
Aye.
Chairman Howell?
Aye. All right. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item K, amendment of a contract with the Kansas Department for Children and Families to fund 1/3 of the cost of exploited and missing child unit for calendar year 2016.
Thank you, Commissioners. Colonel Richard Powell again with the Sheriff's Office. This particular agenda item is secondarily in addition to the MOU that you just approved. The state of Kansas DCF requires a separate contractual agreement in addition to the MOU that we just discussed. In front of you, you have that contractual agreement that basically amends the agreement we've had from the previous year. In the agreement, it defines the fact that they will be responsible for 1/3 of the expenses of the EMCU. It defines in there that there were some name changes. They changed from SRS to now DCF as we know it, and it also spells out specifically what their actual budgetary authorization or commitment will be to the organization itself. That dollar amount, $40,894. And again, this is consistent with previous years. If there are any questions or discussion, I would be happy to stand for any questions you may have. If not, I recommend your approval on this document also, please.
Thank you for the presentation. Commissioners, what's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the amendment and authorize the chair to sign.
Second.
Okay. I don't think anybody from the public wants to speak on this one. I don't see anybody here, and no other questions or comments. Madam Clerk, please call a vote.
Commissioner Unruh?
Aye.
Commissioner Norton?
Aye.
Commissioner Peterjohn?
Aye.
Commissioner Renzaw?
Aye.
Chairman Howell?
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Colonel Powell, and thank you, Lieutenant Rakestraw. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Item L, report of the Board of Bids and Contracts, regular meeting on March 3rd, 2016.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Joe Thomas, Purchasing Director. The meeting of the Board of Bids and Contracts on March 3rd results in 3 items for your consideration. Item number 1 is bridge improvements, and this bridge is located on 51st Street South between 77th and 85th Streets North. The recommendation is to accept the low bid from B&B Bridge Company in the amount of $273,836.80. Item number 2 is the service plan for Regional Forensic Science Center. This recommendation is to accept the quote from Waters Technologies Corporation in the amount of $96,657.75. And item number 3 is a change order number 1 or contract amendment to the treatment chemicals and services for the closed and open loop HVAC systems for Facilities Department. This recommendation is to extend the current contract for an additional 1-year term. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, and I recommend approval of all 3 items.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, any questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
David Spears, Director of Public Works. Joe, there was a typo in your table.
Okay.
You said 51st Street South. It is actually 151st Street West.
Thank you very much for that correction. Thank you.
I guess I have a question on the Regional Forensic Science Center request. This is for a liquid chromatograph. I'm not going to say that correct. Mass spectrometer. I didn't say that right. Someone's laughing at me out there.
Sorry.
Just kidding around. So the liquid chromatograph, am I saying it better this time? Mass spectrometer. Is this a replacement of this equipment, or?
For the record, Dr. Tim Roig, Director of Regional Forensic Science Center. No, sir. This is a service and maintenance contract for an existing piece of equipment that we have in the laboratory.
Okay, so this is just a service contract. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Is this basically similar to a service contract we've had in the past?
Yes, it is. Most service contracts run about 10-15% of the acquisition cost of the instrument. We received this instrument about 4 years ago, and we paid a little over $250,000 for it.
Okay. That's all my questions. Commissioners, what's the will of the board?
I'll move that we approve the recommendations of the Board of Bids and Contracts.
Second.
All right. See no other discussion. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh?
Aye.
Commissioner Norton?
Aye.
Commissioner Peter John?
Aye.
Commissioner Ransall?
Aye.
Chairman Howell?
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, Mike Scholes, County Manager, recommend you approve the consent agenda items Mike through Papa.
So moved. I have a motion. I will second that. Seeing no discussion, Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh?
Aye.
Commissioner Norton?
Aye.
Commissioner Peter John?
Aye.
Commissioner Ransall?
Aye.
Chairman Howell?
Aye. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Public agenda?
All right. Is there anybody here from the public who would like to address the Board of County Commissioners? All right. Seeing none, Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Legislative issues?
All right. I would just like to report that Commissioner Peter John and myself did travel to Topeka yesterday and testified on Senate Bill 316. It has been very interesting to listen to the other people testifying at that hearing yesterday. The opponents are testifying as we speak today. Actually, it is actually still going on right now. So yesterday at 9:30 in the morning, Commissioner Peter John and I were there, listened to testimony of many others that I think made very compelling arguments. What we did offer yesterday was an amendment to fix the tax lid. And again, one of the arguments we discussed yesterday was that it's really not intended to be a lid. It was intended to be we use the word voter empowerment, but simply allow an election process to happen so that voters can weigh in on whether or not they want their government to, their governing body to raise taxes, property taxes faster than reasonable growth factors that are outlined in the bill, outlined in the legislation that was passed last year. The election is necessary. I don't anticipate Sedgwick County needing this, but I do think that other communities may want this, and so one of the arguments against the legislation passed last year was there's not a window of opportunity for an election to happen. And so we used our county experts, our treasurer, our election commissioner, our clerk, and our appraiser all work together to develop a recommendation on how to move the dates in such a way to make an election possible. And that was really the content of our testimony, was trying to provide a solution. And by the way, I think we do stand alone in that. There was nobody else from the legislature or any other organization that provided a solution to what is in fact a de facto lid. So by the adoption of our amendment, which I anticipate will happen, it seemed like there was plenty of support amongst the committee members yesterday. When our amendment is adopted, it actually creates an opportunity for an election to happen. So governing bodies are not really limited in the ability to raise revenue. They will be able to raise revenue, so this is no longer a lid, as long as the voters understand that and give them permission to do so. One of the arguments that was made yesterday was we work for the people that elected us, and actually they are our boss, and so they are the highest form of home rule is the people that empower the government to do their job. So we are servants of the people, and in that regard, and when we have really important business, things like constitutional amendments and other things, we want to make sure we ask the voters for permission to do things or to set policy that's really important. And I think that's what this property tax, called the tax lid, is basically desired that people would basically put a checks and balances on the government officials. So again, I think it's reasonable legislation, but what we did yesterday was provided a solution to the legislation making an election possible. Commissioner Peterjohn, you have some comments.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to publicly express my appreciation for your comments, which I agree with fully. Also, thank you personally for actually doing the driving on the trip up and back. But I wanted to point out a couple of items that I think are quite important, because this voter empowerment provision is going to, I think, solve one of the big questions. When cities and counties want a local sales tax increase, it's quite clear state law says they've got to go to the voters and the voters have to approve it. I think that should simply be extended to property taxes too. The Article 2 of the Kansas Bill of Rights and the Kansas Constitution clearly states, and I may not have been as clear as I meant to be when I testified yesterday, but I'll try and get it right today, that the Kansas Bill of Rights, Article 2, says all political power in the state is inherent in the people. And the voter empowerment provisions in Senate Bill 316 can only take effect if we can change a number of state laws. And Mr. Chairman, you outlined the challenges and the hard work that a lot of folks here at Sedgwick County did to go through those statutes to make this workable. One of the problems that was presented, and there were a lot of folks from the private sector in support of this legislation. Let me take a minute to mention, because the State Chamber, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, State Office, the Kansas Association of Realtors, the Kansas Policy Institute, and Americans for Prosperity were also co-conferees with us in supporting this legislation. Having said that, the local government lobby is adamantly opposed to this legislation. I publicly commended the lead sponsor, Senator LaTurner, from I believe he's from down in the Crawford, Cherokee County area, southeast part of the state, for his leadership in this area and with the legislators. Overwhelmingly, I think it was over 30 senators from both parties who supported this bill when it first went through. But we've got to make it workable, and in the form that it initially passed, there were all sorts of problems in place, and there's an effort to try and delay implementing this bill because of the statutory problems. But if that happens, a lot of local governments, cities and counties, are going to take advantage of this by raising mill levies before the voter empowerment provisions can kick in, and I think that would be unfortunate. I think there needs to be a balance, and I think we need to bring the provisions of the Kansas Constitution Bill of Rights, where it says the power is inherent into the people, into place, and we need to catch up with our neighboring states. 3 out of the 4 neighboring states to Kansas already have provisions similar to this in place, covering, in their cases, all of state and local governments too. So I know a majority of this commission for the last few years has been supportive. It's not been unanimous. We're obviously in the minority. The Kansas Association of Counties and League of Kansas Municipalities will be testifying in opposition to this legislation, or is in the midst of doing that right now. But I think it's important, if we really want to be competitive economically, we've got to reduce the risk and uncertainty of doing business in Kansas, and the fiscal part of the uncertainty, the ease of being able to raise property taxes by a simple majority at local government level is one of the challenges, in an area where we measure up very badly with 3 of our 4 surrounding states. So I wanted to get this on the record in terms of the discussion of the testimony I was able to provide to the committee in Topeka, and I think it's important that the public know that where the majority of this commission stands, and I'll even point out that, Mr. Chairman, that your predecessor helped us adopt this. This provision's been in place for several years, well before you joined us on the commission, Commissioner Howe.
Well, thank you for those comments. I'd like to just say a few more things real quickly. I'm looking at a chart that talks about property tax increases that happened just in 2015 alone. One of them is as high as 40.2% for one county in Kansas that raised their property taxes last year. One of the cities raised their property taxes at 12.7%, another one 11.3%. There's many governing bodies that have raised their taxes in significant amounts of percentage of increases throughout the state of Kansas. So I think that's the reason why the bill drafter this year wanted to expedite the implementation of this law, trying to get it down to 2016. However, our amendment actually suggests basically a midpoint. Our amendment actually is asking for 2017 implementation, not 2016. And I did talk to the carrier of the bill and talked to him yesterday. I also talked to one of the main lobbyists in favor of the bill up there. I heard yesterday that they're actually in favor of the amendment, again, encouraging basically the legislators to not target 2016 for implementation, but 2017. I was encouraged with that. I also talked with some of the council members in the city of Wichita who are very concerned about the remodeling costs being included in the new construction calculation. And I see their point, and I agree with them. And I did talk to the same people yesterday about those provisions, and they seemed like they were very agreeable to that as well. So I think that at the end of the day, this amendment will pass. I think you'll see remodeling costs added back in, and probably an implementation date of 2017 is my speculation. They mentioned yesterday they did some polling trying to find out what people think about this idea, and I think the number I heard yesterday was overall I think 85% agreement by people that were asked the question about whether or not they want taxpayer approval of property tax hikes. In the state of Kansas, I think there was 85%. And I think there's other data I heard that was between 80 and 90% yesterday. So that seems to be a very popular thing amongst voters, people that we represent. They think this is very important. And so I think that drives us towards this policy. Also, I heard yesterday that 21 other states have provisions like this. And Kansas also had a provision in place, albeit a little bit different than we have today here, but had something in place until 1999. So it hasn't been that unusual for other states to have this type of provision in place, and even Kansas itself had the provision in place until 1999. So it's popular with the people we represent. Without this, property taxes have gone up drastically and very quickly in many places. Let me also say that the KAC and the LKM, League of Kansas Municipalities and Kansas Association of Counties, their hope is for House Bill 2609 to pass, believing that that's the answer to the quote unquote tax lid. But unfortunately, 2609 does not have an election option. It does not solve the problem. Their real hope is for full out repeal of the law that was passed last year. They discuss the process by which the legislation was passed. It was not proper in their opinion, and they want home rule. And I've already spoken to the issue of home rule, saying that we work for the people. But their solution really is 2609, House Bill 2609, which does not include an election option. And it really surprises me that would be their position. I did ask Nathan Eberlein, the attorney for the Kansas Association of Counties, if they would be willing to support our amendment. And it sounds like, I'll just speculate, it sounds like he's actually fairly agreeable to it, knowing that if 316 moves forward, that election option is very necessary. So I think at the end of the day, I think that the KAC will actually potentially support the amendment and may actually appreciate the fact that someone stepped up and provided a solution. So we are not. There's no animosity between us and Nathan Eberlein. Again, the Wichita Eagle on the front page, the article they spoke about this. In the picture caption, it says we were arguing with Nathan Eberlein. That's not true at all. We were simply discussing some of these details. There was no argument going on. There was no passion in that in the discussion that was happening there. So for the Eagle to use the term argument, there was arguing going on, I think is not a description I would like to see them use, because it's not true. I do appreciate the balanced perspective of Nathan Eberlein. He's doing his best to bring all these ideas together. At the end of the day, I think he sees the value of the amendment that we provided, and I think he supports it personally, and I think he's encouraging the KAC to do the same. So we'll see what happens. Next in line, I think, is Commissioner Ranzau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to take the time to thank the Chairman and Commissioner Peter John for going up there yesterday and testifying on behalf of not only Sedgwick County Commission, but the Sedgwick County taxpayers. Just to reiterate quickly, the vast majority of taxpayers support voter approval for tax increases, and this is a proud day for Sedgwick County Commission and the Sedgwick County citizens to know that we were up there representing their interest. It's disappointing that we're the only municipality that sees fit to actually take this position, but nevertheless, it's the right. It's a good fight to be involved in. It's the right fight, and I appreciate those efforts. I think it's important for people to understand that the law does allow for increased revenue in relation to growth in inflation and population, a variety of other things. But if you want to go above and beyond that, that's when that requirement for a voter approval kicks in. I think that's very reasonable, and clearly the vast majority of our citizens support that as well, and we're glad to be able to support them in this effort, and I appreciate the efforts of my fellow commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Unruh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, I just need a clarification. HB 2609, does it have a provision for a referendum approval by the electors?
Commissioner John Von Atchen, Assistant County Counselor. 2609, it contains the same language regarding the vote that's in the current statute, but again, that does not, I think, adequately provide for one to occur within a budgetary cycle. 2609 also changes the measure of how the increase is from consumer price index to municipal cost, which is a very different way to assess the increase. It also does have a provision in it that would allow cities and counties to opt out under home rule. That's contained within the provision. It also, on the election side, it would be by petition of the electors. In other words, the vote would still occur in the way that it would, which is that you would approve a tax increase and approve a budget as a board, and then within a time frame under the statute, the electors can come and petition. 2609, I believe the number on that one is 10% of the electors. There was a subsequent bill introduced that would reduce that number to 5% of the electors. Frankly, there are 5 different bills dealing with the same statute here.
But there is a provision for an election by the electors in 2609.
It would not. Yes, it would not be automatic as what the current statute is and what 316 would cover. It would be by petition of the electors. Again, if you're trying to do it within a budgetary cycle, that still creates problems because of the requirements for the election commissioner to be able to conduct an election in a timely fashion, because the election commissioner is not only governed by state law but also federal law.
And that same problem currently exists in HB 316.
In the Senate bill,
they both have problems.
In the Senate bill, the solution in the amendment would allow for a mail ballot vote in order to do a polling vote, which I believe ultimately would, I think, be the preference of supporters of the bill, and I believe the majority of the commission. That would be a situation where we'd have to move a lot of budgetary dates in order to make that work, and I think the indication was that we gave in the testimony yesterday was that the mail ballot was a step in that direction, and that they would have to have an extended period of time to look at all the statutes that deal with the budgetary cycle and determine what would need to be changed in order to accommodate a polling place, and then that, potentially with moving municipal elections into the fall cycle, looking at perhaps having that question, when it's required to be had, on a ballot in August along with the primaries.
Well, I realize the problems. I guess my question was, in the House bill, there is a provision for an election.
There's a provision that provides for an election, and it is by petition of the voters.
Okay. And the measurement for when we reach a threshold for when an election might be required, in the Senate bill, it's just on the basis of the consumer price index. Is that that's what the governor said in his speech, I believe, that he just wanted the CPI?
It is CPI. It is an increase or decrease in CPI. As we've kind of looked at the language, a decrease could potentially affect. And then 2609, that provision changes from a measurement of CPI to a measurement of municipal costs. In other words, what it actually cost a municipality for goods and services.
Do you think that might be included in a revised Senate bill where they use a measurement that more accurately measures the cost of doing business, the MCI?
Like I said, there's 5 bills out there. 3 of the 5 switch to municipal costs as opposed to CPI. I don't know specifically what what the will of the committee is, and obviously this is one that has not yet passed the House of Origin. It's an exempt bill, but it hasn't gotten out of the House of Origin yet. So
a change to an MCI would be a huge improvement, I think. Now, one other question: the state doesn't have any legislation pending that would require the state legislature to get voter approval for their tax increases, say like the very large tax increase that was imposed last year.
There is no provision for a legislative tax increase by the legislature.
Just for cities and counties. Schools are exempted and the state's exempted.
Yes, and that's one of the things that I did want to point out. Obviously, we had the appraiser here early on, and he talked about the other taxing entities. That the provisions in subsegments in 79, 29, 25B, that's the statute. The provisions regarding the vote only apply to cities and counties. It would not apply to any other taxing district. So anything that anybody sees on their statement each year as to where those taxes are going, this only affects the city and the county. The city, if they live in the city, it affects that city. Obviously, affects the county, but it does not affect school district, township, and anything else.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and it's already been referred that the official Sedgwick County position by the majority of the commissioners. It doesn't represent every commissioner, as like Sedgwick County is adverse to another 104 counties in the state. That's already been stated by my colleagues, so we won't have to talk about that anymore. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to just comment back to that. Thank you, Commissioner Unruh. I think that at the end of the day, the KAC may realize that 316 is moving forward, and this amendment that we presented yesterday in our testimony may be something they'll actually embrace. We'll have to see what happens. I'm not so sure that they're against what we're trying to do. I think what we did yesterday, I think, was actually a solution that nobody else is talking about. And with respect to 2609, the two issues I think that are most likely to kill that bill. One of those is the idea that they're going to be able to opt out. I think that the opting out provision that's in that bill. I talked to many legislators yesterday about this, and that is not something they're going to support. I don't believe. I did. I guess I like to whip these bills and trying to figure out what's the likelihood of this bill moving forward in its current format. What's going to happen to the bill? I asked a number of people yesterday about 2609, and I don't think there's a lot of support for it. It's got some issues. Again, this opt-out provision, I think, is a major one. I forget the other issue in the bill now, but there was a couple of issues I thought were especially likely to kill the bill, but that was the main one. I'll go ahead and go on. Commissioner Ranzo.
I just want to say I share Commissioner Unruh's concerns that this law doesn't extend to the state and school districts. I don't think that's a reason to oppose this. I think we should take what we can get, and perhaps in the future we could work together on modifying or introducing legislation or supporting legislation that would extend that to the state and school districts as well, because I think when the voters say they would like to vote for, have approval of tax increases, I think they do mean at all levels of government, and so I certainly do support that, and I share Commissioner Unruh's concerns in that regard. Thank you.
Commissioner Unruh? Commissioner Peter John, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to get on the record and second your remarks, Mr. Chairman, concerning Nathan with the Kansas Association of Counties. I did visit with him yesterday. It was very cordial. We was kind of agree to disagree, which is one of the ways they operate up in Topeka. In fact, that's it's part of the boilerplate of legislative language up there, where people agree to disagree, and Nathan's a very bright young fellow who's got, I think, a great future ahead of him regardless, but I think he's representing his association's position, and we were on different grounds. I hope KAC will see the light in terms of we're trying to make this language workable. Having said that, I want to get into 2609 a little bit, because the question was raised. You know, most elected officials here in Kansas I've talked to, they don't petition to get on the ballot. They pay a filing fee and go on down the road. Now, I'm going to mention publicly and put a couple of my colleagues on the spot, because they didn't do it that way. They went out and petitioned and got their names on the ballot and had to collect hundreds and hundreds of signatures. And in fact, in 2012, when I was elected, I did that too. And that's one of the ways to proceed, but it's a challenging process. You've got to be politically organized to be able to do so. The reason I bring this up is, Mr. Von Atchen, if you'd answer this question, did they, in this legislation 2609, did they set a duration on how long you'd have to collect the signatures, regardless of whether it's 5 or 10% of the registered voters in the county in place?
Right. In 2609, it's specifically 10%, and there is a duration, and I can't recall off the top of my head what that limitation, but you have a certain time frame to present the petition. Obviously, and as we've learned with any petition for election in the county, it's difficult to get signatures. It's difficult to get signatures verified, which is what is required in order to go forward to get a petition on the ballot. So there are some difficulties, whatever the petition question may be, whether it be related to something in this bill or some of the other petitions that we've seen circulated recently. That it is a difficult requirement to meet, because you do have to not only get the signatures, but they have to meet a standard and be verified.
Well, here's the reason I'm raising this, because when you're petitioning as a candidate, you've got 6 months to collect the signatures. And I know on some petitions they only give you 30 days or 60 or 90 days. And to give you a frame of reference, I think there's close to about 250,000 Sedgwick County residents who are registered to vote. They said 10% of the registered voters, that'd be 25,000 valid signatures collected. I don't care whether it's 30 days or 6 months. That is a huge, huge petition drive that if you wanted to get your name on the statewide ballot to run for statewide office, for U.S. Senate, for governor, you'd need only a tiny fraction of that amount. To have that provision in place is basically an affront to the taxpayers and the citizens of this state, and it's one of the reasons why we've fallen behind our neighbors, because they don't require that. It's all, if you want to raise the mill levy, you put it on the ballot. The voters either vote up and say, yeah, we want to do this and we'll spend it on this or that and get something for it, or they say, no, we're not going to support it. Instead of going through this incredible process that I would suspect, and in at least one other county, if you had this requirement in place, the petition drive would have to be larger than the numbers I mentioned. And just for the record, to get my name on the ballot in 2012, I had to turn in petitions of just under 900 valid signatures. Now it's almost a little less than 1,000, but it's a significant number of valid signatures. I've got 6 months to collect them, and if I was running for the legislature, it'd be a tiny, tiny percentage of that number to run for the Kansas House or the Kansas Senate. So to come up with this requirement of 5 or 10% of the entire electorate, this is a poison pill provision, in my opinion, and it's a reason why, Mr. Chairman, when we get to legislative issues, I think we need to be in opposition to 2609. Thank you.
Commissioner Unruh.
You know, I think probably we beat this to death. I don't. But John, were you up there yesterday?
No, I was here working.
Good for you. Good for you. Okay, I don't think I want to say just that our effort as a county is not just to change the procedure, but the majority supports the principle and then advocates for changing procedure. It's different from the KAC, who says, well, we'll get on board with you on the process change, the procedure change, because it simply is not workable. I mean, they passed something, but there's no way it even works. But in principle, I think that the vast majority of counties still oppose it on principle. You know, we can talk for a long time, I guess, on this, so I'll just quit.
Thank you. I do remember the other thing I was going to say was, you know, I think the state legislature, although I do agree with Commissioner Peterjohn's comments and I think Commissioner Ranzau's comments on, I think that it would be nice if the state, when they raised taxes, would allow for a vote of the people as well. I think just to comment on that, I think when you have such a short session, there's not time in a 90-day session to do one of these even a mail ballot. It takes 45 days to mail ballots to our military personnel overseas, for example. So you'd have to actually have this ballot question set at the very beginning of the session, and then let the results drive something at the very end of the session. So I just don't see that this is workable in a 90-day session. It's really a logistical barrier to the idea. Although I'm not opposed to the idea, I just think that logistically it's about impossible. Commissioner Peterjohn, we actually are on legislative issues. I guess I would say on House Bill 2609, I would be opposed to passage of 2609 based on the fact that there's no election opportunity within the bill. Although it says you can have an election, there's no moving of deadlines within the bill to make that election possible in its current state. The fact that cities and counties can opt themselves out of the provisions of the law, I think, is a problem. There's no point in passing the law if if the opt-out provision is in there. And finally, as you mentioned, the poison pill of the petition, that in my opinion actually makes this worthless legislation. So I would be opposed to House Bill 2609, and I would, if we have consensus amongst the commissioners, I would like to have that position officially and offer that to legislators in Topeka. Commissioner Peterjohn?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I neglected to point out that I am in agreement with Commissioner Ranzau on your comments concerning the state and other governmental bodies. This may be a case of let's walk before we try to run, and I support that, and I'd second your motion in terms of 2609. If there's 3 or more of us who are in opposition to that legislation, I'd like to be in a position to include that as part of our legislative recommendations to the folks up at the State House.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ranzau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify, have we not already taken a position in support of 316 or the efforts, because we participated in that? Have we not given enough guidance to staff that they could already say we're opposed to 2609 because we are in fact already supporting the other one? And help write the other one?
I believe that the direction given to staff was that not only to craft an amendment to make an election work, but be supportive of that bill. So that's what we have done. Put the amendment in place with the help of our electeds and appointeds. And then regarding the remaining bills, I think it would be inconsistent to say we support 316 and then also support some of the other provisions in the bills that make, my understanding was anything that makes an election really unworkable was not the will of the board.
Well, I oppose 2609. If we need to make it a specific motion, fine. If you can do it under your discretion, I'm fine too. Whatever the majority wants, I'll be willing to support the chairman, whichever way we want to go. But I think
the direction that I've taken is from the board. My understanding is that anything that made an election unworkable within a budgetary cycle, which was the whole point of the amendment to 316, was not the will of the board. And so, the other 4 bills that don't address that issue, would be bills that we wouldn't support or we would oppose, depending upon how they were crafted. And the other 4 bills, since they don't solve the problem, I've taken that we're opposed to those bills, and I think that's been communicated to the lobbyists as well.
Yeah, for the record, I am opposed to 2609 as well, but if we need to make a motion, I can.
Commissioner Peter John?
Oh, I think we had made a motion. I'd like to, clarify as we get specific legislation that's in front of us and in front of the legislature in Topeka. I think we ought to be clear, at least as it currently stands. If they do a gut and go on it, it becomes the Senate substitute for House Bill 2609. I guess we could revisit it, but the concepts that are contained within it, in terms of the petition process, the home rule opt-out, whatever duration position they have, I think, and I'm sure they did not go through the effort we made to try and make it workable. I think their effort would probably be the exact reverse, which would be to have a bill in place that would be totally unworkable. And so I'd like to get us on record in terms of being opposed to 2609, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Ranzau.
Well, that being said, I'll make a motion that the county commission to take the position to oppose House Bill 2609 and any other bill that is contrary to our stated goals in Senate Bill 316, and authorize the chairman or his designee and our legal department to offer a testimony in that regard.
Second.
Commissioner Unruh.
Just a short comment to say I don't think the state legislature has the slightest clue of what it takes to run the government in Sedgwick County, Kansas.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the vote, please.
Commissioner Unruh?
No.
Commissioner Norton?
No.
Commissioner Peter John?
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau?
Aye.
Chairman Howell?
Aye. Still on legislative issues. Any other comments from the counselor or the commissioners?
Yeah, I have a couple items just kind of a heads up for the commission. First of all, to double back, anytime I get direction on a particular piece of a particular bill, I always look at it as the concept, because some of these bills during the course they died during turnaround, but the concept's still out there somewhere and they could show up somewhere else. So that's the interesting part of the second part of the session is to look at some of those concepts that may have died in a bill that you get brought back to life later on in another bill. Regarding Senate Bill 421, which is sponsored by our friends across the street, that is scheduled for discussion and a possible final action today. In fact, it is going on right now. I believe the indication that I have is that that bill will move forward and get out of the Senate and over to the House. It would allow people who for people to have people who utilize particularly our courthouse on a regular basis, we would control the ability for them to be able to bypass the adequate security measures that are required for this building in order to keep it secure, and so that that bill is going to move forward, and I will keep the commission updated on that one. Obviously, we support our friends across the street on that issue. The other thing, there was a new bill last week, 2714, regarding the appraiser's office. Obviously, we talked to the appraiser early in the meeting today. There are some concerns about how it might affect his ability for valuations. And there's one other item on that is it would move to a biennial appraisal, which can create some problems when you have a market shift. For example, in the late 2000s, when the market crashed, the appraiser's office, on an annual basis, could address the drop in value because of the market crash more quickly on an annual basis than they could on a biennial basis. There would have potentially been a 2-year cycle when property values were overvalued, and obviously that's not what homeowners want for tax purposes. So that bill was heard yesterday. It's going to be worked. I will keep the commission updated on the movement on that particular bill. And so that's all I have. I'll take any questions from
I
you.
was just say, considering the lateness in the session of a bill like 2714 being introduced, I'm going to guess it's probably going to have some interest by some legislators. I would not be surprised if it moves forward. So I guess I'd like us to understand that bill as commissioners and maybe develop a position on that bill. Probably at next staff meeting, I'm guessing, would be a good time for some further discussion on this and see if we can develop a consensus.
I will continue to gather information. I do have some materials that were provided to me that were part of the testimony yesterday that I can provide. I know the Kansas Association of Appraisers opposes the bill. The Kansas Chamber is in favor of the bill. But I will gather the information, get it to the commission so that you guys can make an informed decision on what position you want to take on the bill, if you want to take a position on the bill.
Thank you very much. All right. Any other legislative issues from commissioners? I see none. Madam Clerk, next item, please.
Other?
Commissioner Ranzau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week I spoke a little bit about the county's efforts to get their message out and some comments, some things written by the Eagle editorial board and about their efforts to try and silence some commissioners from speaking on issues. Well, they're at it again today, but today they tried to add in a little humor. In the now consider this portion, they said that I claimed during last week's meeting that the Eagle editorial board wants to silence speech, meaning us. And of course I did say that, and of course they do, but then they say, they act like they're not trying to do that. But then they go on to say that we should keep our meetings professional and focused on county business, which we do, instead of talking about national and international politics. So they're saying we should only talk about certain things that they want us to talk about and don't talk about anything else. They're trying to silence us and limit the types of things that we talk about. Why would they do that? To make their livelihood off freedom of speech. What's wrong with local elected officials speaking on behalf of and to their constituents when they have the opportunity? Well, the problem is we speak about a lot of things in a clear, thoughtful, and factual manner that expose liberal policies for what they really are, and they don't like that. You know, we don't live in a bubble here in Sedgwick County, so there are things that happen in Topeka and Washington, D.C. and all over the world can affect us here. And it affects our constituents, and there's a lot of people out there that are concerned about those things. We have an obligation to speak to those things. We can't always change them, but to let our constituents know what's going on, how it may affect us here locally. We take that opportunity to speak and help get our message out because we need to. We're supposed to. And they want to say we shouldn't talk about those things, particularly about in the other portion. That's what they don't like. Repeatedly, they've said this in the past, and they'll continue to say it. I mean, yes, we've talked about times, for example, we've talked about Obamacare. We've talked about Islamic terrorism, Medicaid expansion, gun control and gun registration, Agenda 21, sustainable development, all of these things, yes, because people are concerned about these things, and they have an effect on us here locally. So, you know, it's just kind of interesting. They want to act like they're not trying to silence speech, but at the same time they advocate for us to not talk about certain things that they don't like us talk about. So it's kind of a humorous way to do that. We need to continue to work on getting our message out. This is an opportunity to do it. We're also going to do it with our newsletters that the chairman's working on. I'm very appreciative of those efforts. I hope they don't say we should stop sending out emails to people too once that gets going. But because the problem is when we do things, we got to get facts out there, and we know that the local media often has a problem getting the facts out there accurately. I know they can do it, but they don't always choose to. I know they can do it because they actually did it today, so I'll give credit where credit's due. There's an excellent article on the West Star seeking rate hikes written today by Mr. Leffler, I'm a facts guy, numbers guy. I like seeing numbers and facts, and there's a lot of numbers and facts here that I think the citizens would be interested in hearing. For me, the number that jumps out is that 11.3%. The Westar gets right now 11.3% profit right now, guaranteed for their stockholders, but yet they're continuing to repeatedly increase rates, which I think something needs to be done about that in Topeka, I think. But nevertheless, this is good, solid reporting with facts and figures. People can judge for themselves. I'm just asking that they be more consistent in other areas as well. So I know they can do it. In absence of that always happening, we've got to find a way to get the facts out there. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to have an honest dialogue with our citizens on behalf of them and for them. And I thank you for this opportunity to exercise my right to free speech and my duty as an elected representative to represent my people and speak out for them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Ranzau. Commissioner Peter John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in agreement with my colleague, Commissioner Ranzau, in terms of improving our ability to communicate with the public and the folks who follow what Sedgwick County is doing. And frankly, we do have an important role, particularly in Topeka, but also in Washington, whether the issues indirect or direct, and whether it's things like Medicaid expansion under Obamacare or any other issue that has a state and federal aspect. I think it's important to speak out. Mr. Chairman, I'd also be remiss if I did not point out that March 9th is an important day in American history. In fact, it was a turning point of sorts. On this date, in 1862, the modern age of naval warfare began with the first battle between two ironclad ships, the Union's Monitor and the Confederate ship Merrimack. And this was off Norfolk, Virginia. And what was important was the Union Army and the Union forces during the Civil War imposed a blockade through their naval forces around Confederate ports. And the Confederate ship Virginia went out to try and break the blockade. If that had happened, they would have been able to get supplies in from Europe, and it would have had a big impact on the war. And they had gone out on the previous day and sunk a number of Union ships that were wooden. And the Confederate ship Virginia, which was looked kind of like a slanted ironclad floating barn with 10 cannons sticking out, had sunk two Union ships, and run a third aground and almost broken the blockade. Well, the next day when they went out to finish their job, the Union ship Monitor was there, and they fought to a duel, and neither ship prevailed. It was viewed as kind of a draw, although the Union ended up as the victor, because eventually Union forces came in, took Norfolk, and the Confederates had to scuttle the Virginia. And the model for the Monitor, with a rotating cannons, became a turning point. And interestingly enough, the inventor John Ericsson, who was a legal immigrant from Sweden, came up with a whole host of innovations that were to drive naval warfare for literally to the present. March 9th is also an important date at other times. Arguably, one of the first direct terrorist attacks occurred on March 9th, 1916, when a group of Mexican raiders during the Mexican Civil War, headed up by Pancho Villa, came into Columbus, New Mexico, and slaughtered 18 Americans. And I've pointed out the fact that, unfortunately, terrorism, whether it's from Islamic jihadists or from other folks, we've had problems with this going back in history. On March 9th, 1945, a major turning point occurred, and arguably more people died during this event even than during the Hiroshima or Nagasaki atomic attacks that occurred a few months later. U.S. B-29 bombers dropped incendiary bombs on Tokyo and created a firestorm that destroyed much of that city during World War II. And I think it's important for this date. And on a much lighter note and a pleasant note, on March 9th, 1964, a iconic American motor car, the Mustang, came out from the Ford Motor Car Company. So March 9th is an important day in American history. I wanted to get that on the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Peter John. We're at the end of the agenda, it looks like to me. Is there anything else for the good of the board today?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right. See no other business. We are adjourned.
Production and broadcast costs for Sedgwick County Commission meetings have been underwritten by Sedgwick County. KPTS welcomes comments from the public on its broadcast of the County Commission hearings. Viewers are invited to write to County Commission